So in this video, I will show you how to import a PDB file and render it with Blender so that you get a very high quality image as an output. So this is once you open Blender for the first time, you're greeted with this screen here. You can just press escape to get away from this greeting screen. I will just do one thing before I start performing any of the tasks. I will switch on Screencast keys. When you have Screencast keys, you will be able to see exactly what I am clicking in this bottom right, clicking and pressing in this bottom right corner of the screen. So if we want to examine what is the default scene in Blender, so this part of the window is called the 3D view. So here we can see a cube, which is called the default cube in Blender. We have a light and we have a camera. We select objects with left clicking on them. In addition to being able to select objects in the 3D view, we have the scene collection list here. And here you can also select objects and perform certain actions. So because we want to actually render a molecule and not a cube, we can remove this cube by just left clicking on it and pressing delete. Okay, so in order to make an image in Blender, we need everything that we would need in the real world. So we need lights, we need a camera, and we need a subject. We want to render an image of a molecule. So we need to first get somehow this molecular structure imported into Blender. To do this, we can use a free software, which is called Avogadro. It's here. It is very nice for organic molecules, and it's quite easy to draw up a structure that you might need. So let's make a CO molecule. So let's do this and just let's remove the two extra hydrogens, and now we can actually optimize with this program using a universal force field. So classical force field, it's very fast for every computer. You just press start. The optimization is finished. We have a reasonable estimate of the CO2 structure, and now we can save this file as a PDB file, protein database file. So let's put that here in this folder here, and let's call it co.pdb. Save. So you notice that there is a double bond between carbon and oxygen here. Okay, let's try to import this structure now into Blender. Before importing the structure into Blender, we need to enable the add-on, which allows us to import XYZ and PDB files. You can find that under Edit Preferences. So when the preferences show up, you just need to type here Atomic Blender PDB XYZ. This extension was already enabled in my install of Blender. Okay, so now once we have this extension enabled, we can go to File, Import, and we can locate here PDB, Protein Database. When we click there, we get this screen, which is the Import PDB screen. So we can navigate to our PDB file, which is the carbon monoxide molecule. And now we can take a look at these settings here. So this is a global scaling fact. So all of the molecules will be shown as sticks and balls models. So we can adjust the size of the global scaling of the balls. Let's put that to 0.7. The distance we can leave at default. We can use sticks. This is the geometric resolution of the stick. 60 seems to be a nice number. The radius, I prefer to put it 0.1, although it doesn't matter. And if we click here, bonds, we should be able to see single double bonds in the molecule. Okay, so this part of the setup is complete. So let's just click Import PDB. And we are greeted with our CO2 CO molecule, and it has just a single bond. Well, this is a very common problem that people find when they want to import molecular structures and they care if they're showing or not showing their double, triple bonds, etc. To solve this problem, basically what we need to do is to edit the PDB file. So I just opened this PDB file using Notepad or any other plain text editor. And you can see that you have this, so the general structure of a PDB file is always the same. There are two lines, which are the heading lines. And then you have following rows start with either HET, atom, or connect. So these atom lines correspond to atom number 1, that is carbon, atom number 2, that is oxygen. And then after that, you have connect lines, and the connect lines basically do exactly as it is written. They connect things. So for example, this line says connect atom 1 to atom 2. If we want to make a double bond out of this, we just need to say connect 1 to 2 and connect it again to 2. We repeat the procedure for atom 2 and say connect atom 2 to atom 1 and to atom 1. And then we can save the PDB file. And let's try to, I will just go back to Blender and I will just undo this import here. And let's say file, import PDB again. And let's do the same PDB. Let's just change this stick distance to 1.8. And say import. And voila, there we go. We have now double bonds. So nice. Now let's make a render out of this, a high resolution, nice, beautiful image. So to do this, let's first put the camera and the light in the correct position. So in order to move anything in Blender, you just need to select it, and then you can either use this tool here to move, rotate, scale, whatever. If you're using these tools here, you can just accomplish everything just using the mouse. However, the easier way to do it is to use keyboard shortcuts, and those the shortcut for moving objects is G. So you can use G to move things. Once you are ready to, once you put the camera in a nice position, you can just click to drop it. Another shortcut is the R to rotate. So then you can rotate the camera in the correct position. You notice that we are now observing the scene through a perfect view. It is a top view. And to get to this top view, you can either use this circle here, left click on this circle and move it around, and then just go to the Z axis and this top circle here, and just click on that. That gives you a perfect top view. Or you can just press 7 on your numpad, provided that you have a full-size keyboard. Okay, so you have 7 for the top view, you have 1 for the front view, you have 3 for the side view. You can, if you have a numerical keyboard, you can experiment with those buttons. But in principle, they are convenient for when you're a little bit confused in this projection of 3D space on your screen. Then you can just like jump to a familiar view very fast. Okay, another way to move things around in the scene is to go to this tab here which says item. This menu here, if it's not on by default, you can press N to switch it on and off. So once you go to item and you have the camera selected here, you can change properties of the camera, which is, for example, position. Let's put it in 0. Let's put it in -20. Let's call this 0 again. So now we have the camera in a nice position versus the molecule, but let's correct also the rotation. So if we say that the rotation versus x-axis is 90 and the rest is 0, this should be perfectly aligned with our molecule. So you notice that I jumped from 3D view to what the camera sees by pressing 0, you can do the same by pressing this button here. So you don't really need the full-size keyboard to perform all of the actions. Okay, now let's try to adjust our light. Let's put the light in the correct position. So let's just click on the light and say G, and let's say maybe the light is coming from somewhere here. That should be fine. Okay, let's see again what the camera sees. And maybe we will want to adjust this molecule. You see there are multiple objects associated with this CO molecule. The best way to rotate the whole molecule is to take a look at what is basically what are the objects that this collection, when we call the function which imports the PDB file, the object which is created is this co.pdb collection. And you can see this collection has multiple things inside, and all of them are important to render out the CO molecule correctly. So if we want to rotate this thing, we actually need to select all of the objects here. Sometimes box select, depending on the version of Blender, can make problems. So a foolproof way to do it is to go here in the scene collection and just right-click and say select objects. In that way, you can be sure that you always selected all of the objects in the collection. So now we can rotate, let's say rotate this molecule around the Z axis. So we can do R, and then, for example, we can, you see, like if you just move the mouse, you get some nonsense. But if you press Z and now move the mouse, the whole molecule is rotating around the Z axis. So let's say that this is nice, and let's rotate it a little bit more around the X. And let's say that is good. And now let's just move it in the center of the frame. Let's put it here. Beautiful. That's it. That should be our molecule. But it would be nice if we could zoom in a little bit. So take note of this tab here. You see this little camera here. You see when you click to the light, you get a light bulb. When you click to the camera, you get this camera. So when you have the camera selected, click on this little camera, and it will show you a couple of settings which are basically the same settings that you would find on a real camera, a real physical camera in real life. So, for example, you can change things like focal length, which is basically zooming in and zooming out. So let's put here some reasonable number, maybe on the long end, let's say 120 millimeters. In terms of camera setting, this is maybe the most important setting. The way to change the aspect ratio of the camera is to go into this tab here. So output properties, and here you can change the output resolution. And let's make a nice square image, which is 1000 by 1000. Now, when we take a look at this, the framing of this image, we can see that there is a lot of white space. So maybe we can zoom in with the camera a little bit more. So let's zoom into something like this. And pretty much, if we are liking what we are seeing, then we can just render this image out. To do this, we have to select the proper render engine, and we'll be using cycles for this. So we click to cycles. We can save our project now. It's always good to save the project before starting a render. So then we save the Blender file. So that will contain all of the settings in the scene. And now we can press F12 to render. And now, as you can see, the render is taking some time to finish. And it is not particularly attractive looking. So before letting this finish, let's adjust a couple of settings to make this looking a little bit nicer. So I will press escape, and that will cancel the render, and I will close this tab. So if we go back to this dimensions tab here, let's put the scaling of the output resolution to 50%, because then my computer will be able to render the output image faster, and we'll be able to play around with the settings and see the final result a little bit better. Okay, so what we are looking now is the 3D view, but the 3D view has a setting which you can access by pressing Z, and that is the shading of the 3D view. And if we go from rendered, from solid to rendered, we can see basically how the final output image will look like. So, being that this is a little bit gray, the image is a little bit gray, let's select the light and go into the same as we did for the camera. We have now a little light tab here, a little green light tab here. And now we can adjust the power of the light. So we can completely bleed it out if we want, or we can completely switch it off. Now, even if the light is switched off, you will notice that actually it's not complete dark in this world of Blender. That is because the background, the sky, as you may call it, has a color, and in this case, this is this plain gray. So let's put some reasonable number for our light source, which is again here. And for example, now you can notice that there are relatively sharp shadows on these objects here. If you want to make these shadows softer, you can just increase the size of the light. So for example, if we go 0.001, you can see how this shadow here is hard, sharp. If you go to something larger, the gradient takes longer to decay. Let's put 5. And we have nice and soft shadows. Another thing that we can do is to take this light and press Shift-D to duplicate it, and just move it on the opposite side of the object, and maybe even decrease the power a little bit. In that way, the shadows will become even softer, and in general, the image should be more aesthetically appealing. Okay, let's say, for example, that you would want to render this thing out now. Press F12 to render. And if you would like to save this image, you just go Image Save As. And let's call it COPNG. Let's call it CO Gray PNG and save the image. But let's say you want to use now this image, the CO Gray PNG, in a PowerPoint presentation, and you had a colored background. It is not very convenient because the background of this CO molecule is gray. There is one setting that you can use to circumvent this problem, and it can be found under this tab here, and under Film. If you just click Transparent, it will add the alpha layer to the PNG image, and once you render it with F12, you will be able to get the transparent background. So if you have a color background in your PowerPoint presentation or whatever else that you're making, you can just drop this on top of whatever. So let's save this image as CO alpha. Okay, let's now say that you would like to change the size of the balls and the materials of this balls of the CO molecule. So to edit these properties, you need to go into this scene collection under COPDB and then locate carbon mesh, carbon ball. Once you have the carbon ball selected, then you can change the scale of the carbon ball to something ridiculously small, for example. something way too large. So you can play with this after you imported your file. To change the same applies also for oxygen. So you go under oxygen mesh, oxygen ball, and you can play with this. To change the material for the oxygen and carbon balls, we need to open another type of editor, which is called the shader editor. So to move around this, to resize the window, you can just like click on this line that separates this timeline here and the 3D view, and then you change the type of editor here by clicking on the shader editor. Okay, once you have the shader editor enabled, now you can change the properties of materials. So I have the oxygen ball selected, which means that I would want to change the color or shading of this oxygen molecule, oxygen atom. So to do this, we just need to like select the proper object, which we have, and click Use Nodes. Once we click Use Nodes, we get this material output node, this one here, and we get a principled shader. This shader contains basically all of the physical properties of the surface of this material as far as Blender is concerned. So it will tell it how to reflect light, which parts of the spectrum to reflect, and all of these things based on the settings that are available in this tab. The most important setting is basically the base color. So when you change this base color, you can make the ball look any color you like. Okay, of course it is oxygen, so we'll keep it some type of red. That's good. The second setting that could be interesting could be this roughness setting. So obviously if something is rougher, it will look more opaque. And the less rougher it is, the more glossy it will appear. Basically, if it's perfectly smooth or the roughness is 0, it will look like a billiard ball. So let's put this in somewhere in the middle. Let's say 0.2. Another distinction between materials in Blender is whether the material is dielectric or metallic. If the material is metallic, you can take the slider and push it all the way to 1, and suddenly you see this oxygen ball looks like it's metallic. Of course, you can play with the roughness here as well. So, provided the oxygen is not a metal, let's put the metallic slider to 0. In principle, only values of 0 or 1 for the metallic slider have physical meaning. So you should always keep this at 0, either 0 or 1. Okay, let's put the roughness at 0.2 and call that good for the oxygen molecule. Let's do the same now for the carbon. So we go to carbon ball. We say use nodes. Let's put the base color a little bit darker. Let's put the roughness again to 0.2. And let's call that good. Now we can just press F12 to edit, to render. And we have our finished CO molecule. Now again, we can go to image save as, and let's call that CO nice. Save as image. And basically, this is literally everything that you need to know to make a molecule using Avogadro, to save it as a PDB file, to then draw explicitly the double bonds by editing the PDB file, and to adjust all of the settings in Blender to render it out, to be able to use it in presentation and such. So I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.